Welcome, everyone, to our Q1 2026 Performance Update webinar. We are excited to be here together. We're doing a little bit of a different format. You may remember, I think it was our very last webinar. We tried the TV in the back. We were trying to go kind of like newscaster style. That didn't work with the glare and those sorts of things. So what we're going to do this time is we'll continue to have our slides shared per usual, but we're going to toggle back and forth between our faces so that it's more conversational, has that, friendly vibe. And then we'll also have our slides. And then, I may have okay. I think everything's working there. Sorry. I want to update for you guys that I want to show you something new that we're starting. So you can go to blackswanteam.com/updates. And this has been here for a couple of years now. But what you'll see here is about, midway down, you'll be able to download the slides yourself. So let me orient everyone to this website in case you haven't seen this part of our website before. So again, this is blackswanteam.com/updates. And what we have on here is all of the information about how we communicate with you. We put out almost daily updates on our various social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, those sorts of things. We have a weekly newsletter that goes out every Tuesday via email. And then there's additional emails that go out. Like, for example, you would have gotten call reminders for this Zoom call. And then we do these quarterly updates that we do live. So if you're joining us live here today, thank you for that. And then we get those replays out as quickly as we can. Usually it takes about 24, 48 hours. And when we get those replays out, we put them on our public YouTube channel. So at any time you can go to youtube.com and search for Black Swan Real Estate and find us there. We also put them on this website, blackswanteam.com/updates. So you'll see here all of the quarterly updates for the past several years, both the video, if you want to get the full story, watch it, listen to it podcast style. And then we also create a brochure every quarter as well for those folks that maybe don't prefer the audio version, or, usually our updates might go 75 to 90 minutes. So if you want a quicker digestion of the material, you can consume it via the brochure format. And then for those of you who are invested in one of the funds, we also send those updates via the Invest Next portal so that you'll get the call reminders, the replays, all of that is right there in your portal. But wanted to call attention to this website today so that if you would like to follow along with the slides, this is our first time doing this, you can go to that website right there and download those slides right there. And then you'll have those to follow along as we're doing our presentation today. When we did the presentation last quarter and we had the TV in the back, I asked for feedback and got a number of emails from you guys, things that you liked, things that you didn't like. And ultimately, we decided that wasn't a format that we liked, but we're always trying new things. So would love to hear from you if you like being able to receive the slides while you're going through the presentation. Always open to feedback. Want to make sure that you're getting what you want during these performance updates. So that's what I have in terms of a little housekeeping stuff for us today. And then one other thing that you'll notice is we've changed our naming convention just a little bit. So historically, we've been calling our performance updates the quarter that we're reflecting on. So we would call this one, for example, Q4 2025. But that just it sort of never made sense because we usually do it about 4 to 5 weeks after the quarter ended. And we would always have fun updates to share during that time period. But it's like, well, do we not talk about those updates because they technically didn't happen before January 1st in this situation, or do we include them because it's the most exciting and most up-to-date information? And so we just decided that the most reasonable thing to do would be to change the naming convention. So you'll notice that we've changed the name of this one to Q1 2026. It's a continuous story. There's no quarter that's missing. We've just changed the name of our performance update so that the time that we're delivering it to you is the name of that, because we have a ton of stuff to share that's happened even in January, and we didn't want to have to wait all the way until later this spring to share that stuff. So that's a couple of housekeeping updates, kind of the more boring part of our update, so to speak. But hopefully
I'm excited. A lot of fund operators, they don't do kind of any of this stuff. It's extraordinarily rare to kind of get live on the air and do live Q&A with with people that trust their capital with us. We love doing this, and so we kind of have the the webinar live format. We have the podcast format. People love consuming that. People do the YouTube video format. We do the brochure format. A lot of people, they like to binge those updates on the performance site when they're contemplating an investment or a new investment, or they'll kind of skim a bunch of them and then call it good. So we try to hopelessly over communicate, and we're always trying new ways to get more communication out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump in to our update for this quarter. Our usual disclaimer, the following presentation is for informational purposes only. It is not for solicitation to sell securities to non-accredited investors. In these performance updates, we reflect on both historical events that have happened in the portfolio, and we also make prospective looking statements. Past performance is never an indication of future performance. There's always risk to investing. If you're contemplating an investment, you should always review the entire PPM and the operating agreement. Speak with your trusted advisors, attorneys, CPAs, whoever is important to you. All investing does have risk. Let's jump in.
If this is your first time joining us, just a couple bullet points about us. So my name is Nick Stageberg. This is my wife, Dr. Elaine Stageberg, and together we own and operate Black Swan Real Estate. It's a real estate private equity firm specializing in multifamily, single-family homes. We're pushing $500 million in assets under management. Seems crazy to say that.
Nick's been waiting like 5 years to say that.
When we hit $1/3 billion, that felt really magical, and then it's like a $500 million. But then, man, to get to like the full billion, that's gonna be a while. Over $450 million in assets under management. We've raised over $115 million of capital so far. Secure Freedom Fund is kind of the vehicle that we currently have available for investment. There's a wait list available for you now. You can go check that out at securefreedomfund.com. We're not open for new investment right this second. We've got a real estate sales team. So we own this office building where we're doing this webinar, and kind of next door to us is the Keller Williams office for southeastern Minnesota. And we have sold pushing $250 million of
I knew you were
going to
say that. I was waiting.
And we do a little bit of new construction as well. We just had a new project get certificate of occupancy about 7 months ago here in Byron, Minnesota. So we've done over $50 million in ground up construction, working on our next new project right now. So we love real estate. We love buying real estate. I guess we don't love selling real estate. That's not something we do as much. We don't sell things that we own. We just help other people sell things from time to time. And if you're joining us for the first time, this is just us kind of talking about how things are going and making sure that investors who have placed their capital with us, they understand what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have the chat function available. So if you have any questions as we go through our presentation, per usual, pop those into the Zoom chat there, and we'll either answer them as we go along if it kind of fits into the slides, or we'll make sure that all of the questions are answered at the end. Something that's coming up, it always, I'm sure you experience this in your life too, is like the year always goes way faster than you might anticipate, is we're already, deep in our preparations for our 2026 Real Estate Real Life. This is our annual conference here in Rochester. It's exactly what the title is, Real Estate Real Life. So we spend about half of the time doing real estate investing education, talking about financial freedom, you making a plan for you and your life. And then half of the time in that real estate portion, goal setting, talking about what an ideal life is for you, digging deep into the meaning behind all of this. We genuinely believe that the point of financial freedom is to live a big, amazing life, not just to have a great balance sheet. That is coming up September 17th to the 20th with an optional VIP day on Monday, September 21st. Right here in Rochester, we spend about half of the event in a hotel ballroom instead of the #1 rated Hilton in North America. And then we have a full day where we go on a tour bus and we tour the portfolio. And people absolutely love that, even if they're like not so sure about it at first. Of like, I'm not sure I want to spend a whole day looking at apartment buildings. How many apartment buildings can you look at? They, unanimously describe afterwards that they understand the portfolio. They understand real estate investing at such a deeper level. I'm sure you've experienced that in your life, where book learning and hands-on learning are two totally different things. So we are open for our ticket sales right now, rerl2026.com. We would love to have you. If you are a member of our Freedom and Legacy coaching program or our Legacy Launchers, which is folks who have invested $1 million or more with us, you do get complimentary tickets for Real Estate Real Life. So we'll be reaching out to those groups soon to see if you'd like to join us with your complimentary tickets this year. But we'd love to have as many of you as possible, rerl2026.com. September will be here before we know it. It's our favorite time of the year. This is our 5th Real Estate Real Life. Last year was our best ever, and immediately after the conference ended last year, we got our team together, did a whole retrospective, and said, okay, how do we take this and make it even better? And so very much looking forward to our 5th iteration of Real Estate Real Life in September. And then a couple of updates about tax time. It's very, very, very important for you to keep your investor information current. The portal, if you are an existing investor, is blackswan.investnext.com. You'll have a username and password. You can sign in there. And it's super important that you keep your information up to date, like your address, your phone number, your email address. Make sure that either your social security number or your EIN is in there, and make sure that it's for the right entity. Oftentimes we'll hear from someone, they'll say, well, I invested in my, say, self-directed IRA, but I accidentally put my social security number. So make sure it's the right account information, full account name, and then the number there. It's critical for tax time, critical for making sure we get your distributions out to you. This would be a great time to just take a look at that, because we'll be sending off all of that information to our accountants.
You won't hurt our feelings if you're updating your information in InvestNext right now, because
absolutely,
we love getting prompt, accurate K1s to you.
100%. And it's a hassle for everyone if we need to reissue your K1. It slows down things for you. We don't want that to have to happen. So let's all work together to prevent that from happening by you going in there, making sure that your information is all up to date. If you have any questions, as always, you can reach out to Rachel. Many of you have worked with her. She's lovely, very timely in her responses, knows the InvestNext system inside and out, and is here to support you with any of those tech questions. Rachel@blackswanteam.com. And then in terms of K1 updates, it is a huge goal of ours every year to get our K1s out as quickly as possible. So Fund 1, 2, 3, 4, and the Secure Freedom Fund will all receive 2025 tax year K1s. We are targeting April 1st for our delivery of K1s, and we send those out in 2 separate ways. The first way that you'll receive it is via a secure email that will come from what is called Safe Send Returns. And the reason we send it that way is that's an encrypted, secure service that gets the K1s to you, usually like with just in hours of when I receive them, I approve them from our accountant, and then I get those out to you. So it gets it to you as quickly as possible. A couple of days later, then, we also do a mass upload to the InvestNext portal. We put it in the InvestNext portal so that you have access to that K1 for years to come. You can kind of think of that as like your file archive. The reason we also do Safe Send is because there's a couple of day delay. So you'll get Safe Send fastest, and then a few days later, we upload it into InvestNext. It's the exact same document. So when you see those 2 emails a couple of days apart, you don't necessarily need to go into both places to access the document. Safe Send is so that we can prioritize getting them to you as quickly as possible. And InvestNext, you can think of that more as your long-term record keeping. So years from now, when you're like, oh man, I need that K1 from 2025, you'll just pop into InvestNext and it'll be right there for you.
There's a great question there. If you have multiple investments in Secure Freedom Fund, will all come on one K1. Like most tax things, it is a it depends answer. We have people who have invested 4 or 5 repeated times in Secure Freedom Fund already. And sometimes they're investing, one investment from like a self-directed retirement account, another investment from, a joint account, another investment from, a trust they have for their family or something like that. And so they would get different K1s. But if you have multiple investments coming from the same source, as much as possible, we try to make sure you just get a single K1.
Yep, absolutely. Good question there. Thank you, Jenny. And then one other thing I want to share about the K1s, because this question comes up every single year, is one of the beauties of the Black Swan funds is that it's really simple for your K1 filing. You'll file at the federal level, your own state, and then Minnesota. A portion of the Black Swan portfolio is also in the state of Washington, but one of the beautiful things about Washington is there's no personal income tax at the state level, so no one files a tax return there. There are no other states in the Black Swan portfolio. Think your state, federal, Minnesota. That's it. What confuses people is that when you get your K1 packet, you'll notice that it's pretty long, and there are often a number of additional states in there, because some states require that at the fund level, we file a K1 if an investor lives there, not because we have a property there, not because we do any business there, but simply because we have an investor there. And then we have to disclose the entire K1 to you. So you can essentially ignore that information. It only applies to you if you live in that particular state. But if you don't live in one of those states, it's essentially information that you don't need. So think federal, your state, Minnesota, no other states. I hope that providing that information early and often, and many of you who've been in the funds for a number of years have seen that and have been through that, and that helps with any questions that might come up, because it often happens like April 13th when someone's like, my CPA is filing and oh my gosh, I need to file in 7 different states. What's happening? No. That's just because there's an investor that lives in that state and we're obligated to disclose those forms to you. And then I also want to call attention to our K1 education video that's available on YouTube. Our very lovely CPA, Kaylin Deaver, put this together a couple of years ago. You can find this on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search for Black Swan Real Estate K1. We also have the direct link there right in the slides. K1s are not necessarily intuitive documents, so it's helpful to understand how depreciation works. And for example, you may see a little bit of interest income on your K1 because we keep the dollars that are owned by these funds in high yield savings accounts so that they're earning a little bit of interest each month, and that gets shared out with our investors, all of those sorts of things. So take a look at that K1 video. I find that answers like 98% of questions for people, and hopefully by providing all of this information early, it prevents any questions coming up. Of course, if things come up, we're here for you. You can email me, Elaine at blackswanteam.com, email Rachel at blackswanteam.com. We'll get you through tax time, but let's all agree to be proactive together, get your information updated in the InvestNext portal, blackswan.investnext.com. Take a look at the K1 video, and then know that we'll be sending your K1s to you via both Safe Send returns and uploading them to the InvestNext portal a couple of days later. I'm going to turn it over to Nick. That was a long couple updates for me here. So why don't you take over for me?
This is a very expensive meeting. And so we spend a lot of time talking about this because we know that this is like the number one thing for people this time of year. And we really want to make sure that we can proactively answer these questions right now and not on April 13th, as Elaine just alluded to.
It's my 40th birthday on April 12th. So high likelihood that mid-April emails will be a little bit delayed. So we're trying to get all of those answers out to you as quickly as possible.
Yeah. So let's dive into kind of the meat of the day here. So just a few headlines from the last quarter here in Black Swan. We closed on Villages Essex Park. We're unbelievably excited about that. We closed on December 30th. We had to move heaven and earth to make that happen, but we know how much our investors value depreciation. That was one of the questions that came. By the way, as we're going, feel free to pop questions into Q&A. That's the best way to do it so we don't lose track of those questions, and we'll try to answer them as we go and get to questions at the end as well. So we the team was not excited about it. I was actually supposed to be on a silent retreat that Elaine had secretly planned for me as a Christmas gift. And she was like, well, I guess you're not doing that since we're closing on Essex, and a lot of people kind of changed their plans. Team members flew in from out of state and stuff like that because we really know how critically important that depreciation is to you. So we made it happen. We've got an update here on distributions, kind of just a few portfolio-wide updates. We're going to try really hard to keep things tight today. We know it's a midday presentation. We'll try to make sure it doesn't go too long. I'll give you a few updates on ICE in Minnesota. That's something that people have asked questions about. And again, we're very transparent. So we'll give you just some updates on that situation. Talk a little bit about the just incredible rent growth that we've seen across our portfolio. And then we've got a property that we closed on in addition to Essex, Northern Hills Apartments. It's crazy because it's a 32-unit apartment building, and it almost has gone unnoticed because we just closed on a 288-unit apartment building. That's really cool that we could buy a 32-unit apartment building, and it's kind of it just gets an afterthought. And then we're announcing 2 additional acquisitions that we just got here in the last 24 hours. So that's why we're like, man, we really want to be able to do these up to the minute, kind of quarterly updates here.
Yeah, just in the last, let's call it 48 hours, we've gotten 2 properties under contract, and I have the cost segregation study for Villages at Essex Park in hand. I'll be turning that over to our CPAs when I have a meeting with them tomorrow. So things are always moving, right? It's always it's a fast moving story, and we're excited to share the updates with all of you.
Absolutely.
Our big update for this quarter was closing on Villages at Essex Park. We have a whole update for you a little bit later in the presentation for that, so stay tuned for that. And then the big question that folks have right now at the start of every new year is about our distribution plan for 2026. We sent out to all investors in funds 1 through 4, our anticipated distributions for 2026 in December of 2025. Of course, for the Secure Freedom Fund, it's just that 10% fixed rate of return with either the monthly cash flow option or the compounding option. But for funds 1 through 4, since those are a variable rate of return, we send out what we call forward-looking guidance, and we try to send that out in December of each year so you can make your plans for the following year. For Fund 1, we started monthly distributions in 2024, carried those through 2024 and 2025, and we've returned over 20% of capital. So Fund 1 is right about 4 years old. It's 4 years, 1 month old, and we are spot on target there for our return of capital with the distributions that we've done so far. Fund 2, we started monthly distributions in 2025, and we've returned 6.3% to date. And then we shared with the investors in Fund 3 and 4 that we're excited to start our monthly distributions for 2026. So you should have seen that go out in your emails, and then you'll start to see that depositing through your bank account here for February 1st. So we'll be doing monthly distributions for Fund 3 and 4 in 2026. I'm excited to get those started. And then, as always in our portfolio, we've never had any capital calls. We've never had any capital loss. We're going to address that in a little more detail here in the next couple of slides because that's so omnipresent right now with investors, right? There's been such headwinds in the real estate industry for the last several years since interest rates started going up in mid-2022. And it's something that we're so proud of, that we've never had a capital call. We've never had capital loss. We don't have anything on our radar that indicates that we're at an increased risk for that. And we want to share, why that is. And you've heard these stories before in terms of fixed rate debt and conservative underwriting and those sorts of things. But it's always important because we inevitably, what will happen is someone will have a capital call or capital loss with some other investment, and then they'll email us. And they're very transparent about it. They'll say, I just lost money with XYZ investment. Now I'm worried about, all of my other investments. And we'll provide some reassurance. And so that's something we want to make sure we're doing here during our quarterly update as well.
And just another slide here if you're following along watching the video. And again, you can follow along on the slide deck. But we're continuing distributions for Fund 1 at a 1% annual rate. Fund 1 and Fund 2, that's what we're projecting for 2026. And then 4% for Fund 3 and 4 with regularly scheduled distributions for Secure Freedom Fund. So we were doing a 4% distribution last year on Fund 1 and 2, and we're doing a 1% distribution this year. We're going to speak to that here in just a little bit. And then just a reminder, so Fund 1, for example, closed December 2021, but we closed on the last purchase of Fund 1 in April 2023 with RDS. And I feel like this is something that people often forget, just the incredible amount of assets that we were able to get loaded into that fund over a 2-year period. So we bought an entire portfolio of single-family homes, re-levered those, and then used that capital to purchase half of Residence at Discovery Square. So if you look at the total assets that fund owns relative to the fund size, we're able to get just a staggering amount of assets into that fund, which in the long term will drive a maximum annualized rate of return, but drives down our cash-on-cash rate of return in the short term, and it extends that time horizon. And you'll notice as we have done these funds, we have shortened that window during which we're purchasing assets. So, for example, we were purchasing assets for a couple of years in Fund 1, and then as we just kind of responded to feedback from people in Fund 4, we went from opening and closing Fund 4 to purchasing the last asset very quickly. Only a 3-month window between when we closed Fund 4 and when we purchased the final asset in that fund. And that's just kind of responding to feedback. And then ultimately, I'd say Secure Freedom Fund is sort of our most recent response to investor feedback. For us, it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. We're happy to do, 2 different funds that have, shorter windows or one big fund that has a longer window. But I think investors, especially if you're only in, one of those, 2 vehicles or something like that, however you want to think about it, I think investors, they prefer the shorter window. So, you have maybe a little bit more short-term certainty or more short-term data. I can't think of the right words for it. So just a note I want to point out there.
Yeah, a question came in a little bit earlier pointing out that we do have a wait list for the Secure Freedom Fund right now. That's true. And then asking the question of when would we have a wait list for Fund 5. We don't have that on our radar right now. I think it's exceptionally unlikely that we would do a Fund 5 in 2026 or probably even in 2027. The Secure Freedom Fund is a very large fund. We're only about a third of the way through that capital raise. And the way the Secure Freedom Fund works is we open and close it as we get new acquisitions under contract. So we'll be focusing on the Secure Freedom Fund for a number of years to come. Good question there.
Yeah. So, in case you're wondering, why did we change our distributions for Fund 1 and Fund 2? Well, we changed the distributions for Fund 1 through 4, and we look at these kind of on a regular basis. Every quarter we look at our distribution schedule, and we try to change those distributions as infrequently as we can, and kind of January 1st is the time to change that. But let's just dig into a little bit of the why here. We live in a time of exceptional uncertainty, which makes us really love real estate assets. It's one of the most durable, timeless assets you can own. It's like gold or something like that, but it actually delivers a return. However, we need to be really planning ahead and looking at the next few years, especially when it comes to a few specific factors. So the first one is interest rate uncertainty.
The story of the last 4 years.
Yeah.
I long for the day we can stop talking about interest rates.
Amen. Amen. They rose faster than ever before in history.
We'll show this graphic here, tracking the U.S. rates, and then kind of describe qualitatively what we're seeing as well.
Yeah, just an extreme swing. That upward climb there in 2022 is historically unprecedented. Now, fortunately, we procured fixed rate debt during that time frame, and we have a bunch of long-term fixed rate debt on the books at a time when about 93% of multifamily deals were closed with variable rate debt, and that's why so many operators have had so many struggles here over the last several years. But at some point, that fixed rate debt does mature, and we're starting to look ahead to what that looks like. No one knows for sure what interest rates are going to look like, but we can make some educated guesses. One of the most critical factors in determining that is kind of what is the Fed saying. So let's take a look at that for a second here. So you may have heard some things, seen some things on CNN with the current administration attempting to fire one of the Fed governors. There's a Supreme Court hearing where the Fed kind of prevailed. Cook prevailed here. There was this whole kerfuffle of the Federal Reserve building renovation, and these are all just completely unprecedented things in the history of the Federal Reserve. And so historically, the U.S. government has had its ups and downs. The U.S. economy has, but the U.S. Federal Reserve, for all its flaws, has been a place of certainty in the global economy, and that certainty is kind of less certain than it's been in probably since World War II or something like that. Just in real time here on January 29th, Kevin Warsh was announced as the new appointed Fed chair. Still needs to be confirmed by the Senate, but that was a very surprising appointment because we know that the current administration wants to see interest rates go lower, but it's kind of interesting because Kevin is not an advocate of lower interest rates. So this was quite shocking. Yeah. But current administration, they really like strength. They despise weakness, and Kevin is certainly a strongly opinionated person. He has public comments like quantitative easing is reverse Robin Hoods. That's how the Fed went from 800 billion to $9 trillion on their balance sheet here recently for COVID stimulus and stuff like that. And that's like an interesting position for a Federal Reserve chair to have, and that's something that chair would have a lot of influence over. It's a democracy. There's votes, so their influence over interest rates is actually not that significant in a lot of ways, but lots of influence over policy like quantitative easing. And Kevin has very explicitly said that he seeks to disrupt and reinvent the Fed. Some of those explicit comments are he calls the Fed dot plot deeply unproductive, does not think transparency is a virtue. Plot. We have the dot plot on our webinars all the time. Yeah. We will miss you, dot plot. And we don't, I don't like that. I think transparency is a good thing. He does not think that economic models are a virtue. Well, the Fed has 10,000 economic PhD grads and stuff like that on staff. There's a huge win here, though, I think, which is that Kevin is a staunch proponent of Fed independence. So, like a very shocking appointment, frankly, from the current administration of an interest rate hawk and not a dove, but still requires Senate confirmation. Who knows if this person will actually take office or not? And this is all news from the last 4 days. And the point of this is no one has any clue what interest rates are going to look like next week, next month, next year, and we have to be even more conservative in our underwriting and kind of preparation and hoarding liquidity for the future. Talking about expense pressure, if you go take a look at, I think it was our Q2 2025 webinar, Rachel can maybe throw a link in a chat, or if you're on the site, you can go to blackswanteam.com/updates and see that we did a deep dive on this, but operators have had extraordinary pressure on many fronts that has squeezed cash flow. It has squeezed net operating income and squeezed cash flow. So, taxes, Nicholas and Oliver went from $234K to $335,000 in taxes. Black Swan, as we're doing our annual tax, kind of planning, we're going to pay over $3.6 million of taxes in 2026, or about 2.5% of the tax levy for the entire county. And this is something we did a deep dive on again, about 7 months ago, and how kind of the central business district of most municipalities has collapsed, and that tax revenue has declined by like 90% in some cases. And you can't really ratchet up taxes on single family home owners because they show up to city council meetings and complain. And so that's really multifamily real estate that's the only people paying the bills for most of municipal society at this time. It's just an interesting situation for our society. Insurance has been a huge bogey. We've been able to forestall and defray that cost in a massive way. We've been very successful, and yet, one of our properties, we just got an increase of 137% on one of our properties. That is it's your second highest expense next to taxes, and that is a brutal cost to try to shoulder. In our municipality, we have a 6% year-over-year increase in utility costs. There's a couple screenshots from like our local news and stuff like that. Of my favorite one is that they're planning on implementing a natural gas fee. They're actually inventing new taxes. This is a tax that's never been charged before, and they had to do some legal research. And they're like, yeah, there's nothing in the state law that prohibits us from applying a tax on a utility that we have no role in delivering. So if your municipality owns the utility provider, usually they can tax it, but if they don't own the utility provider, usually they can't. And so they're going to start taxing utilities they don't provide even. And then, hourly, electrician rate from $70 an hour to $105 an hour in the last 5 years. Labor costs have skyrocketed. And then, if you go take a look at our state of the market, we like deep dive into this. Cost of a washing machine that we typically put into our properties in the last 5 years gone from $350 to $670. We replace a lot of washing machines each year. So these are just really challenging, kind of headwinds. So this is kind of the second reason why we're being extra conservative about our future planning and planning our distributions for 2026.
Do you want to talk about bringing some of those skilled trades in-house?
We do have an accepted, well, we have a verbally accepted but not signed accepted offer letter with a master plumber. We have a job posting up for a master HVAC tech. We're trying to hire a master electrician. We have a job posting up right now for a sprinkler, fire suppression, fire sprinkler technician, to try to bring that in-house. We're meeting with the fire marshal so that we can do our own alarm monitoring in-house. We're going to put up an ad for an alarm tech. We try to bring elevator in-house, but that's kind of the mafia along with waste disposal, literally. So that's a tougher one to bring in-house. Just any expense, literally, we just go line by line by line, and how can we vertically integrate this to control our cost, reduce our cost? And we'll show you in a few slides how we've been extraordinarily successful. I think we're performing in the top 1% of our industry on this front with kind of heroic effort. But man, oh man, are there a lot of headwinds right now on the expense front.
Yeah. Nick actually spent his silent retreat, much to my dismay, because my silent retreat was my gift to him as his wife. That was my Christmas present for him. And he's like packing up his monitors and all of this stuff. I'm like, bro, what are you doing? I think I literally said bro because I was so flabbergasted. I'm like, you're supposed to be taking like a book and maybe like some religious texts and like a journal and I don't know, some like watercolors or something, and like praying and sleeping and meditating. And he's like, oh no, I'm going to do like a deep dive into every balance sheet and income statement in the whole portfolio. And I was like, really? Like this is my like Christmas gift to you. This is for you to have a couple of days away from the kids. Like, are you sure? It feels awfully odd to me as your wife that I would send you on a Christmas gift of like, here, go work for 16 hours straight. And he said, oh no, this is what brings me joy. And I know that is what brings Nick a lot of joy. But a couple of days later, I'm like, Nick, are you sure? Like like silent retreat is different than go to the office for 3 days straight. And he's like, no, I'm sure. Like this is really what, provides me with just a lot of clarity, and it excites me, and it gets me excited about the things that we can implement, in 2026 and finding patterns and those sorts of things. So his 3-day retreat, which happened last weekend because we had to bump it from the first of the year, because closing on Villages at Essex Park was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then most of a Sunday, where he was working, what would you say, like probably 16 hours a day,
Yeah.
In an Airbnb, heads down, no phone ringing, no kids, nothing.
Brought a computer and my 3 32-inch monitors and everything, nothing else.
So
it was beautiful.
That's Nick's idea of a good
every
time.
number. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about ICE in Minnesota, right? If you have opened any sort of news browser in the last month, you have seen, what is happening in our state, and the uncertainty and quite frankly, the chaos that it's causing in our state. I will say that blessedly, Rochester is somewhat insulated from Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the suburbs there. We're about an hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes away. In many ways, we're just kind of so separate from the cities, and that's been, to our good fortune here in Rochester through this really tumultuous time. What you've seen in terms of like large scale protests and maybe some property damage, and certainly the very horrific deaths of two people in Minneapolis. We've been shielded from that here in Rochester. To some extent, even here in Rochester, we're kind of looking at the national news and almost sort of stunned that it's happening, so close to home. But it has affected Rochester. It has affected our portfolio. ICE has been present at our properties multiple times that we're aware of. It very well could be more than we're aware of, but we tend to be pretty aware of things in terms of residents reporting things in, our staff reporting things in, our amazing security cameras, hearing from local law enforcement. So we think we're aware of all of the times that ICE has been present at our properties. Individuals have been apprehended and taken away from our properties. Our experience has been that these are folks that we knew had criminal backgrounds that we inherited when we would close on a particular asset. Some folks who were unauthorized, they weren't on the lease, and they were living in a unit that we were attempting to remove and hadn't been able to. So far what we have seen is that the folks who have been removed from our properties are folks that we were trying to have removed from our properties in one way or another and hadn't been successful in doing so. Nick has personally intervened in these situations, which is quite concerning to me as his wife, as you might imagine, seeing what's on the news and seeing what has happened, but really believing in showing up and stewardship and that extreme ownership of property. So when we do find out about something happening at one of our properties, Nick will try to get there, just essentially to keep the peace, right? To be a voice of reason and attempt to keep everyone quite calm. We have noticed that some of our contractors are a little afraid to show up for work, working with folks, attempting to make sure they have secure transportation, those sorts of things. I don't think it's maybe quite as bad as people are seeing in the cities, but it's certainly something that's on our radar here in Minnesota. We've privately hired law enforcement, again, just to keep the peace, kind of be that stable sort of neutralizing force between, say, residents and protesters, and then ICE. Local law enforcement is kind of serving as that kind of communicator go-between here in Minnesota, and just really doing everything that we can to keep our communities calm, safe. Nick always says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." I get a little choked up because I get scared, when you go to the properties. But blessed are the peacemakers, right? And I think kind of regardless of where someone falls on the political spectrum, right? There's huge opinions on both sides. I think collectively our country is moving toward a place of like, hey, this has really gotten out of hand. Like the level of chaos is really staggering, and maybe we can find a way to agree and disagree in a way that's much more peaceful. And hopefully some of that is happening over the last couple of days and week or so, as there's been some changes from the administration. We'll see. This is an unfolding situation, and even thinking about like as we're making our forward guidance for our distributions in December. In December, ICE was not on our bingo card, right? Yep. It was happening in other places in the country, and obviously this administration has been, very focused on immigration, but never did we think, Minnesota is going to be in the front page of all of the headlines, here in the next couple of weeks. And that's what we mean when we say we're just, not just us, but all of us collectively, humanity is living in a time of unprecedented uncertainty and speed of change. And this is an example of all of that. Anything you want to add there?
So just very concretely, like we're on the front page of the news every day right now. It's very weird to see that because our experienced reality is different from that. There's 10 to 20 times more arrests in Texas, for example, than Minnesota, and yet Minnesota is certainly the top of the news cycle. In terms of keeping the peace, like someone will call out, hey, there's a strange individual, kind of at the property, and I'll go to the property and I'll go speak to this person. And we've had people on both sides, of the situation, maybe trying to watch out for ICE, trying to frankly just to like start trouble on both sides of the spectrum here, and just, hey, what are you up to? What can I do to help you? Hey, I really admire your advocacy for either side of what, I admire engagement, and I respect that, but you really can't do it here. And I'm going to have to call local law enforcement, and we've got local law enforcement, basically on payroll, overtime officers, so an officer can come and we can trespass you immediately. I really don't want to do that. That's not. I don't have a political outcome here. Just we can't have escalation at our property. We have to keep the peace, and just have there's no judgment in our heart here. We just want our people to be safe, and those people they'll go somewhere else. And if you let that one person camp out or be there, and then another person shows up, and then that is how people get shot. And that's all it takes. It just takes someone who cares to show up, and like one of our situations where ICE was there. They were there for 11 minutes. They came, they met with one individual, had to forcefully remove that person, but talked to their spouse, said, hey, here's his phone and wallet, here's what we're going to do. Here's how you reach them, here's how you reach us, and then left as quickly as humanly possible before it could escalate. And we're not there to support or stop anybody or anything, but we have been able to keep the peace at a time when a lot of people are failing to keep the peace. And I'm unbelievably proud. Like, it takes some grizzled staff to be in the middle of this thing and to keep a cool head and to keep your people safe, and that's exactly what our team has done. But this was not on my bingo card for 2026. This is not how I thought I'd be doing the Essex transition.
I long for a day of
second day of
bingo.
Owning Essex, and we're like,
yeah.
What do we do here?
Yep. Absolutely. Let's talk about something a little more sterile. I have to pull my sleeves up because I'm a little flushed there. Let's talk about loan maturities. That's kind of the opposite of emotional 2027, 2028 loan maturity. So a question came in, if assets have fixed rate debt, how does interest rate volatility affect our investments? That's an excellent question. So the structure of fixed rate debt is that typically it's a 5-year term. There's all sorts of terms in commercial lending, but we tend to strive for at least a 5-year term, kind of the longer the better, where you have that period of certainty. And during that period, there's exactly that. There's that period of certainty where interest rates can go up, down, all around, and it doesn't impact the portfolio. And with variable rate debt, that's what we have seen over the last several years, is through 2022, 3, 4, as rates went up, that caused debt service to go up. And so then assets not in our portfolio, but in other folks' portfolio, would then have higher mortgage payments, which would lead to lower cash flow, which could eventually lead to a cash crunch, which then could lead to a capital call, capital loss. And we were shielded from all of that because we made the really tough decision to get fixed rate debt through the pandemic. So from that sense, yes, it is true that interest rate volatility does not impact assets with fixed rate debt. But where that changes is when there is a loan maturity. So after, say, that 5-year period, then that loan needs to be refinanced. And that's when whatever the interest rate is at that time, that impacts the portfolio. So the nice thing about 5-year debt is it gives you a 5-year window to work with, because typically what happens with interest rates is they go up a little bit, they go down a little bit, right? They tend not to just go up and stay up for a prolonged period of time. And conversely, they tend not to go down and stay down for a long period of time. So it gives you a longer window, but rates have gone up for the last several years since mid 2022. They came down a little bit over the last 3 Fed meetings, and then the most recent Fed meeting in January, they decided to hold rates steady. But we're always thinking about loan maturity, which is the time when whatever the debt on that property matures and needs to be refinanced.
Yeah. So one of the investors here had a great question. If you have fixed rate debt, how do loan maturities impact you? This is, I think, this is like the perfect, kind of lead into this question here. Let's talk about like a very concrete example of this. Hampton's Townhomes that I think is very easy, simple to understand. This is owned in Fund 2. We purchased this property 3 years ago for $1.55 million. It's worth $2 to $2.2 million today. We're way ahead. This has been a out of the park home run deal. We've got over $500,000, $500,000 of equity in this deal. And in the 12-month period leading up to our refinance event, we had over $41,000 in positive cash flow, which is a massive amount of cash flow to have on such a small purchase. It was like a 16% cash on cash rate of return, just an insanely successful property. When this particular property only had 3 years of debt on it because we had negotiated a very favorable seller carry, could only get 3 years on it. So most of our properties, we get like 5-year debt or sometimes even longer than that, like Essex has 30, 35-year debt on it. In this case, it was 3-year debt. I think this was just about the only property in the portfolio that had 3-year debt at the time, but this is just like a good, kind of leading indicator here. So we refinanced from 5% to, at the time, 6.75% was kind of the best rate we could get, which it's come down a little bit since then, but it's still a significant jump up. And because lenders have tightened things so much, we were previously able to get a 25-year amortization. This time we could only get a 20-year amortization. And so even though our rate didn't go up much, it went up, and then our amortization went down, and basically went from $41,000 of annual cash flow to almost zero cash flow. And so now we have the situation where we've got a massive amount of equity in the deal, but it is difficult to unlock. It's difficult to turn into cash. So that's like a small example. I hope that is like a very understandable thing of we've been really protected from these high interest rates because we had fixed rate debt, but that debt does mature and the rate resets. And we have some loan maturities coming up in the future. Fortunately, we have 0 loan maturities in Fund 1 through 4 for 2026. We are unbelievably fortunate compared to most of our peers in the industry where like their entire portfolio might be turning over in 2026, but we need to plan for that future event. Looking at a bigger example here, so this is RDS. This is one of the largest assets in the portfolio. And again, you're using a couple examples, a big one and a little one, to try to help people understand the implications of the current uncertainty in the interest rate environment. So Fund 1 and Fund 2 own this. We bought this in 2023 for $27 million. We owe $22 million. Today and appraised in Q3 2024 for $36 million. We have $14 million of equity in this asset. This is
based on appraisal.
Yeah, that's not our opinion.
Right.
This is a third-party appraiser working for a lender who is incentivized to come up with the most accurate or even kind of lower appraisal because the bank probably wants to have a lower appraisal. We have $14 million of very real equity in this property. However, cash flow is thin because of the kind of operational expense headwinds that we've talked about. And if rates go down 1%, just 1%, we could probably refi this thing for like a $5 million cash out refi in about 18 months. Next, fall 2027, when we got 3-year debt on this because we had a feeling we'd be able to get a significant cash out refi in the near future. So if rates went down just 1% from where they're at today, we could get $5 million cash out in this property, very, very confidently. But if rates go up 1%, we would have to fight to avoid a cash in refi. We'd have to fight to avoid a cash in refi despite having $14 million of equity in this deal. So there's like the big numbers there with Hamptons. So Hamptons is like a small, understandable kind of example, and then RDS is like a big example to illustrate just how the magnitude of this uncertainty and how it impacts our planning for liquidity. You might ask, well, aren't we improving operations? So here's an example of Nicholas. This is like the cornerstone deal in Fund 1. When we bought this deal in 2022, it had $1.7 million of top-line income, and we've brought that all the way up to $2 million of top-line income since then. And this was not a distressed asset that we did there was no big renovation or anything like that. This is a legacy asset in an incredible location, and we've still been able to push income in a huge way. And it's even more exaggerated when you look at net operating income in 2022. So the seller net operating income was much lower than this. It's actually, there were limited records. It was difficult. I wouldn't be surprised if their net operating income was like $500,000 or I don't know. It's difficult to know. But our first year operating it, we had $792,000 of net operating income, and we pulled that all the way up to $1.17 million in net operating income incredible outcomes, truly incredible outcomes with this asset. And yet when we look at, kind of what that interest rate environment was going to look like for 2028, we could potentially be in a tight situation for refinancing that asset. How likely is that? It's very difficult to say. We've run all sorts of scenarios. So despite, pushing NOI, we're still in a tight situation. Again, you can see like most operators do not achieve these outcomes. These are heroic outcomes that our team has just pulled off incredible things. This is just how challenging the environment is right this second. The environment could certainly improve. I think it almost has to, because some things are going to break in the economy soon. But this is what we need to plan for. And this is what we're planning for with our distribution schedule. And then, Elaine mentioned this, but the state of the market, it's a negative outlook for most operators. These are a couple emails that we got just in a very short time. I'm sorry, these are posts on Facebook that we saw just in a 10-day time frame that we got some snippets for our Q2 webinar that we did. And again, I think Rachel probably shared a link for that or something where we did a deep dive here. But we've had investors reach out to us and say, hey, I've invested in 10 different syndications, and more than half of them have announced a complete loss of capital. How are y'all doing? And just coming from a place of extraordinary fear and scarcity. So that's why we're over communicating about what we're doing right now. And we're still doing distributions. That's another thing to reiterate, is we're still doing distributions. So we're unbelievably excited about what we've been able to achieve. We like to say that we built an arc. Warren Buffett is famous for saying, predicting rain doesn't count, building arcs does. And we're telling you that right now. Fun fact, by the way, the arc, it's very precisely described, its dimensions and stuff. No sail and no steering wheel in any of those instructions, though. Just build something that will stand the rain, that will stand the floods, and be able to survive. And that's exactly what we did. We don't know exactly what the world's going to look like next week, next month, next year. We have a time of extraordinary uncertainty. I'd say greater uncertainty than at any other time in my entire adult life. And we have planned for that successfully. I'd say we're performing the top 5% of everyone in our industry. And I see us being, really set up for success in the next couple of years. I could see us performing the top, 1% of our industry here in the next couple of years, because we aren't trying to make any rain predictions here. If anything, we have blasted y'all with a lot of, sophisticated explanations of why there's so much uncertainty out there right now. So we don't care very much about having a sail or a steering wheel. We've got a big boat that we know can stand the floods and stand the rain. We're unbelievably proud of what we've achieved here in the last few years.
A good question came in just now. You've given examples of how interest rates are affecting funds 1 and 2. How does interest rates affect the 10% distributions in the Secure Freedom Fund?
Great question. So Secure Freedom Fund, and this is, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but this is why we're doing Secure Freedom Fund. So Secure Freedom Fund has a very different investment thesis than the legacy funds. Legacy funds targeted high appreciation, legacy assets that you'd want to own for life that, 20 years from now are going to be, even more scarce, cherished, special than today. And Secure Freedom Fund is really targeting assets which are, frankly, they're going to be lower class assets. So instead of an A class asset, it might be a B or a C class asset. We're targeting, affordable housing properties in Secure Freedom Fund. So those properties tend to not appreciate very much, because they deliver great cash flow, but they don't appreciate. They're not necessarily worth any more 10 years from now than they are worth today. That's just kind of the profile on that asset. And same with, a C-class asset versus an A-class asset. We're putting long-term fixed rate debt in place on those assets in Secure Freedom Funds, often with a loan assumption. So we're assuming, Freddie Mac debt, HUD debt, and those loans run for a very long time frame, so that by the time we get to the maturity of that loan product, we're going to be in great shape. Whatever the future looks like, we're going to be in great shape by the time we get to the end of that loan product. So just as an example, we put that 3-year debt on Hamptons in Fund 2 because we were projecting this kind of wild upside event in Hamptons, and we achieved it, but we're not getting any 3-year debt in Secure Freedom Fund. And it's kind of interesting, if you go back to our recent webinars, believe what we do, not what we say. We're showing you the Fed dot plot. We're showing you the forward yield curve and treasury rates and stuff, saying it looks like rates are going to go down, but we don't know that for sure. And so we were locking in fixed rate debt at 6.75%, at 6%, instead of, a lot of people right now are thinking about getting variable rate debt because it does seem like rates are going to go down. And we're saying, nope, we want to be protected from the downside event, even if that might keep us out of a potential upside event. So that's basically the business model for Secure Freedom Fund. Oh, and one final thing, we got way lower leverage on assets in Secure Freedom Fund, which again increases the cash on cash rate of return, but reduces the average annual rate of return, just to drive security for those investors. And the average annual return has a bigger impact on how much like Elaine and I make over the next 10 years, but sets up those assets for security and for success to deliver that 10% cash on cash rate of return for investors in Secure Freedom Fund.
Yeah, for example, one of the assets in Secure Freedom Fund has a HUD loan product on it, so it has a 37-year term on it. Like that, you can't get that at a local or a regional bank or even Fannie or Freddie. You have to get into a HUD loan product, and those often involve loan assumptions and those sorts of things. So while it provides a great deal of certainty for the cash flow that asset will likely produce over the coming years, there's almost essentially no path to doing a cash out refi. We could potentially do a cash out refi, but then we would be getting rid of like 2-point-something% interest rate debt that we have the availability to use for the next 37 years. So just kind of qualitatively, the debt and the deals that we structured in the Secure Freedom Fund are really different. Looking at the level of uncertainty that's in the market and instead asking ourselves, how can we acquire things with the highest degree of certainty? So long range fixed rate debt, loan assumptions, lower leverage so that we have more cash flow, all of those things. So great question there. All right, let's answer a couple of questions. So we are on slide number 26, if you are following along in the presentation that's at blackswanteam.com/updates. And we tried to make these just as simple and clear as possible to make sure that our messaging gets across here. So what does this mean for Funds 1 and 2? And I kind of think of Funds 1 and 2 and Funds 3 and 4 as kind of separate from each other. And really it comes down to Funds 1 and 2 existed pre-2022 when interest rates had the huge escalation, and then Funds 3 and 4 existed post-2022. That's kind of why we think of, Fund 1 and 2 are kind of like brother-sister funds, and Fund 3 and 4 are kind of like brother-sister funds to each other. So are Funds 1 and 2 at risk? No, we don't believe that they are. We always take cautious, conservative, forward-looking action. When we look at 2025, interest rates, expenses, all of the things that we've been sharing in our quarterly updates and our weekly emails and social media, all of those sorts of things, we believe that it's extremely prudent to increase the liquidity in Funds 1 and 2. And in a couple of slides, we're going to speak to the liquidity because it's important to us to prioritize long-term security over short-term gain. So what that means is, we would much rather have long-term security in the portfolio where we don't run any risk of running out of liquidity in the portfolio over distributing it out, say another extra couple of thousand per investor, right? Like why have like a risk for, such a small gain of just a few thousand out to investors? Is there a possibility of a capital call? No. And in fact, in all of our PPMs across all of our funds, we have no provision for an involuntary capital call, which is pretty rare in the industry. That's why we must be so conservative. Yep. When we distribute cash out, like that's
getting it back.
It doesn't exist to the fund anymore. So we have to make absolutely certain that all of our funds have enough liquidity to cover expenses and loan payments. And interestingly, banks always want a lot of money in the bank when you're doing a cash out refi. That's one of the first things they look at, which like seems kind of paradoxical, but also makes sense from the perspective of the bank, right? They're like, oh, if you're low on liquidity, we don't want to lend to you. Whereas if you're high on liquidity, then you're likely a much more reputable borrower. So we have to be so conservative. Next question is there a possibility of capital loss? And to that, again, we would say no. We don't believe there's any meaningful risk of capital loss. Of course, putting in that caveat that we can't control things like natural disasters, fires, acts of God, other unforeseen circumstances. There's always risk in investing, but there's nothing on our dashboard that has us at all concerned about capital calls or capital loss. We think of our stewardship of Fund 1 and 2 as being extremely conservative, extremely proactive, extremely forward-looking, and making sure that when we reach loan maturity on assets in Fund 1 and 2 over the 2027-2028 period, that we're very well protected from that. And one of the really nice things that Nick mentioned a couple of minutes ago is we have no loan maturities in 2026. So all of the uncertainty and the things that we're dealing with in 25 and 26, we're very aware of them. We're thinking about expense reduction and working with the county assessor on our taxes and bringing things in-house to lower expenses and those sorts of things. But we don't have any crunch that's happening in 2026 because we have no loan maturities across Fund 1, 2, 3, and 4 in 2026. But that's how proactive we are, is we are already thinking about what are the decisions that we'll need to be making in 2027 and 2028, and how do we set the funds up for success there. So I hope that that's helpful. Again, it's right there in the slides. It'll be in the brochure. Hopefully that provides you with a lot of clarity, a sense of calm, right? That, it's our belief that there's no risk for a capital call or capital loss, and that the portfolio is well positioned and swimming in equity. But just because of the nature of the market right now, cash flow is challenging. And then we want to be ultra prepared for our loan maturities, and who knows what that might look like when we get to those loan maturities. What does this mean for funds 3 and 4? So for funds 3 and 4, we were able to start distributions a little bit ahead of schedule. We started them February 1st. So I think Rachel and Shanna reached out to any of the investors in those funds, made sure that your ACH was linked or that you had an address so that we could mail your checks to you. So if you are in one of those funds and you've not yet responded to them, I think there was just a couple handful of people, please do, so that we can make sure your distributions get out to you. Very conservative underwriting in 2024, 2025. We knew all through the pandemic that rates would go up, not because we have any information that other people don't have. That's just the cyclical nature of interest rates. They go down, they go up, they go down, they go up. Interest rates were not going to stay at that ultra low pandemic stimulus level rate for a long time. So we locked in as much fixed rate debt as possible. But I don't think anyone really anticipated, and we didn't anticipate, how steep rates would go up in 2022. That has never happened before in the history of the Federal Reserve. You can go back and look at interest rates over the last 40 plus years, and you'll see ups and downs, and even through the 70s and 80s when things were pretty crazy. The steepness of the curve was unprecedented in 2022. And what that led to is we became even more conservative, and we are really conservative. I'm more conservative than Nick. We are really conservative, kind of averaged out between the two of us. We became even more conservative in 2024, 2025. We were able to lock in really favorable purchase prices because we were acquiring these assets when everyone else was selling, right? There was such a kind of doom and gloom in the market in 2024, 2025. Sellers were doing fire sale because they, either they weren't able to get a capital call from their investors, or they knew they had lost all of the capital, so they just wanted to cut ties, or they wanted to avoid foreclosure. And so we were able to come in, and instead of kind of 2019, 2020, 2021, when everything was multiple offers and bidding wars and back and forth, it was quite the opposite, right? It was so interesting to see the flip that the brokers would be following up with us, sometimes every 12 hours. Did you look at the information? Are you going to write an LOI? Anything I can do for you? It was such a different feel in the market, and that led to really favorable purchase prices. Fixed rate debt with loan assumptions, that's a theme you've heard from us for years and years and years. And then a lot of stability in the assets. So we have a couple of updates on Georgetown, Bayswater, Stonehaven Apartments. We've talked about how Stonehaven has gone so well in terms of the speed of the construction, coming in under budget, the lease up there. Things are just really stable in that portion of the portfolio. During that time, we didn't do huge, large-scale renovations. We focused much more on acquiring something, improving operations, working with existing residents, doing things like utility improvements and efficiencies and common area improvements, but not necessarily going in and doing what's called programmatic renovations, where you do renovations in every single unit. So they're a lot more stable, a lot less kind of wild swings that might come from big value add plans. Fund 3 and 4 is much more a story of just quiet, steady progress.
And what does this mean for Security Freedom Fund? Kind of said this before, but we're just trying to make this. We did like a deep dive into kind of our thought process here, but just being very clear, our distribution is changing for Security Freedom Fund. No, it's a 10% fixed rate of return, and nothing has changed whatsoever with Security Freedom Fund.
Good questions. Let's see here. I think couple.
We should let's talk about liquidity for 1 second before we dive into Q&A.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think this is like.
I'll go back to sharing my screen if you're looking, because sometimes seeing the numbers is a little helpful for our visual learners.
We'll have some slides for you in just a little bit about rent growth. I think that's like one of the most easy to understand numbers. There's a lot of complex numbers here, and we've definitely noticed the more numbers we put on the screen, like the attendance drops in real time and stuff like that. So we try to make sure we explain things clearly, we make things as qualitative and photographic as possible. But I think rent's easy to understand. Is your income going up? If so, you're probably doing okay. And how much cash do you have? So Fund 1, we've got $650,000, over $650,000 in cash in hand for an $11 million fund. We'd really love to have more than that. We'd really have, like, if we had like $1.5 million right this second, that'd be great. Fund 2, we've got $2.4 million in cash on hand, so a pretty hefty amount. We'd love to see ourselves having like $3 million in Fund 2. Fund 3 and Fund 4 are kind of swimming in liquidity right this second as well. Fund 4, $1.4 million on a $12 million fund, and Fund 3, $900,000 on a $16 million fund. So if we wanted to, we could keep doing distributions for another year and like hope that interest rates get better. But that would not serve y'all. What serves everybody right now, and we could like sell these assets and almost certainly end up well ahead. But now's a terrible time to sell, just an unbelievably terrible time to sell. And so we know that the wise course, the hard thing to do, that is ultimately the right thing to do, is to dial back distributions for right now and just make sure that we have even more liquidity to be prepared in case this flood lasts longer than we think or is deeper than we think. And be set up for ultimate success 20 years from now.
All right. Let's go into our portfolio-wide updates. I'm
sorry, you want to do some I said, let's talk about the liquidity. We don't have to. Where are you going to?
We're right at the top of the hour, so we will make sure all the questions get answered, but I want to make sure we get through our slides, and then we'll answer any outstanding questions there at the end. So our portfolio-wide updates, thanks to Sophie on our team and many other team members who have contributed here, we have new websites for a large portion of the portfolio. When you think about kind of the life cycle of real estate, it all starts with marketing, right? Having attractive media out there where people can envision themselves living in that community, knowing how to contact a leasing agent, having swift access to showings, the background check process, all of those things, right? It all starts with essentially internet searchability, right? That's how people find, if you were moving to a new place to live, you would search the name of that city and then like Rochester Apartments or something like that. And so we spend a tremendous amount of time and effort on marketing. And we've worked with a vendor over the last several years to roll out all of these really premium websites across the portfolio. So take a look at one or two of them. I think you'll be pretty impressed, where you can see the layout of the entire community, the layout of the common areas, individual units, what they look like in 3D version, see where it's located in town, real-time availability, rental rates, really just a premium experience for people who are browsing the internet, looking for a place to live, and then receiving those leads into our leasing team and triaging them as quickly as possible and reaching out to people. So right there in the slide deck, you can see those links, and I encourage you to take a look at one of them. It's an interesting, nice experience to see what it would be like if you were a prospective renter and you were thinking about living in the Black Swan portfolio.
We had our Christmas retreat, year-end retreat, where we celebrated wins, and there were so many wins to celebrate for 2025. We kind of cast a vision, and we transparently share that with the team, and then we go review that vision. So we've got we kind of highlight in green the ones that we nailed it, and red the ones where we didn't call it right. I said that there would be fewer acquisitions in 2025 than 2024. Nick says that
every year. Our team just rolls their eyes. That was true for 2023.
Yeah.
So it's been true once.
2025 was the best acquisition year in the history of the company. And then just some block and tackle stuff. So we talked about the headwinds with expenses. So literally we got every single employee. We've got 61 full-time employees now here in Rochester. We get them together for an entire day in a room, which is a very expensive day. and we just talk about what we want to see, what we need to see happen in the company. So, for example, we had a goal to reduce our year-over-year per unit per month maintenance expense by 50%, and we absolutely crushed that goal. Went from $188 per unit per month to $89. Wait, that's like exactly 50%. Wow, I just now figured that it was like green at the retreat, but I just now noticed that. No, that's not exactly. That's better than 50%. Yeah. Okay. There we go. By a little bit. Average per unit per month utility costs, we wanted to reduce those by 20%. And if you came to Real Estate Real Life and saw the Black Swan toilet, you understand how ferocious we are about keeping utility costs down. We did very well. Didn't quite hit 20%, but got darn close. Average per unit per month cleaning costs, we wanted to reduce those by 20%. We did a little bit better than that. We reduced that by about 25% year over year. These are not easy things to achieve, by the way. This is like we need to meet with staff and optimize where a vacuum cleaner is located. We've hired multiple people whose only job is to juggle maintenance tickets. So just lots of really cool highlights here. Reducing our per unit per year legal cost dramatically, getting a 100% lease up at Stonehaven Apartments, just a heroic outcome there. Raising capital. So we went from $28 million in capital raise in 2024 to $35 million in 2025. Just extraordinary outcomes across the board. We got to celebrate. We could spend a whole webinar just talking about that amazing retreat and the outcomes there. But we're trying to keep this tight here and just share some of a few of the amazing things we've done this quarter. We mentioned tax or headwinds. So we have a very productive professional relationship with the assessor. Some people are like fighting in court every day with the assessor. We meet with them. We walk our properties. We give them our thoughts on how much things should be worth. Put together our own CMAs and stuff. We're able to get Meadow Park 2022 taxes payable reduced from $109,000 to $73,000. Nicholas 2027 payable taxes are going to come down from $335 to $295. We've seen it's a constant battle. But we have a very good relationship with them. We just walked Riverview and Stonehaven townhomes with the assessor here recently. We're waiting to hear their thoughts on that and how that might affect 2027 payable taxes. But we're always working on that. We had some good tax wins this quarter. This is an interesting one. So Boulder Ridge, this is in Fund 3 and Fund 4, had a pretty huge win here. As we've said before, when we bought this, it was deeply distressed. It was on the watch list with HUD, which is not a good list to be on. That's where HUD is watching you very
naughty
closely.
List.
Yes, this is the naughty list. They put you on a score.
It's like the list with Santa you don't want to be on.
It is a bad list. They put you on a score of 1 to 5. We started out 1, and we're up to a 3, which is very hard to do. Just to try to put this into context here, we've spent $875,000 on improvements in less than a year at this community. Many of those items are addressing kind of deferred maintenance and HUD findings and stuff, other unit improvements. We just completed a $100,000 improvement project to the common areas. So in that photo, you see all new lighting, and we painted the doors, painted the walls. There's a nice little chair rail there, and these are certain things that HUD called out, and we've kind of gone the extra mile to make them happy, but also make the property beautiful. There were 124 items. These are not necessarily trivial items. These are like, siding is missing in this piece of the building or something like that. We resolved all 124 of the items. They immediately came out and did another inspection and found another 113 items that they wanted remediated. And
a lot of them are like you have to remediate them within like 24 hours or 48 hours. It's intense.
Yep. Yeah, it was a freezing cold day, and there were like windows sticking, and they're like, oh, that's like a safety hazard. It's like it's 20 below zero outside. Like, yeah, the windows stick. So we're aggressively remediating those, and then we're trying to get HUD to reimburse for these items. There's a huge $2.3 million escrow that we can draw from. So just tireless work from our team and lots of success at Boulder Ridge here this last quarter. Yeah,
Boulder Ridge is a huge community, a large number of units, large amount of acreage there. They're kind of townhome units. Mm-hmm. It was built by a builder that typically builds single-family homes, so they're larger in square footage and bedroom and bath count. So it's just a big literal boulder to move. I like that. I just made that up just now.
We're getting almost to the top of the hill.
Yeah, I love it. Let's talk a little bit about rent growth. So this would be a great time to take a look at the slides so that you can look at them up close. We put this information in the brochure as well, but it's nice to see the charts here. So our total rent collections across the entire portfolio a year ago January 2025 was 23 million, and January 26 we're at 36 million. That comes from curing vacancy post-construction, adding new assets such as Stonehaven. The big one is Villages at Essex Park, all of the other acquisitions we had in 2025, and then rent escalations during renewals and our leasing season. It's a 56% year-over-year revenue increase, which is really exceptional for a portfolio of our size. It's easy for a small business, right, to go from 5 units to 7 units or, something like that. When you're getting into the, hundreds, we're now past 1,000 units. When you're getting into the tens of millions, it's much harder to, keep that pace of growth. But it's pretty exciting, and it's exactly what you might imagine. Hiring people, training people, constantly meeting with the leadership team, making sure they're on board, they have what they need to work with their teams, getting everyone up to speed on new assets that are coming into the portfolio. It's an exciting time. It's despite all the headwinds and everything in the industry, it's still very much a growth-oriented time, and it feels good to grow at a time when much of the industry is shrinking. And speaking of that, national rent growth continues to decline. So we shared this in our last quarterly update, and sharing it again here, that across the country, there has not been much rental growth. There was a huge burst of rental growth through the pandemic as people were working from home and relocating all across the country and those sorts of things. And then that halted and even went into negative rent growth over 2025. Where, say, if rent at a unit was, say, $1,000 last year, it might be $950 this year, and needing to offer concessions and those sorts of things. And our rent growth continues to be very, very strong. So our average year-over-year rent growth from renewals alone is 7%. And it's really important that that come from renewals, because then that eliminates vacancy and turnover costs, which are the two largest expenses outside of insurance and taxes, but kind of the expenses that a property manager themselves can really control. So we really push renewals. It's the most profitable part of any property management company. And it's also what's good for the community, right? To keep people, housed in that community, staying in their jobs, their schools, with their neighbors, the same grocery store, all of those things. That stability throughout the, not just that apartment community, but the broader community as a whole. Nick personally reviews all of our renewals. We hired another person to work exclusively on our renewals team. We've continued to work with our leasing team over the last couple of years. We have an Overwatch captain. We've talked to some of these updates in the last couple of webinars. So if you haven't caught those, you can get all of that at blackswanteam.com/updates. But wanted to just, continue to show our rent growth slides here. And then the next several slides, there's a lot of numbers here. We could spend a lot of time, kind of going asset by asset through all of these. But I think it's best if you download the slides, or in a couple of days when we get the brochure up, download the brochure so that you can, take a look at these and really understand them. What you'll see here is for each asset, we show the average rental rate at the time of acquisition, and then we show the average rental rate in the most recent period that we have available. So we'll take Nicholas and Oliver here. I'll share the screen here and we'll go over kind of one example, and then you can look at the slides to get the rest of the information across the portfolio. So this is Nicholas Oliver, and you'll see the acquisition date, and that's right below there. So we acquired Nicholas Oliver in December of 2021, and our average rental rate at that time was $1,381. And then in December of 2025, our average rental rate is $1,824. And we try to share these numbers in every single quarterly update. We're running a little bit low on time this time, so I'm glad that we've made the decision to put all the slides out so that you can look at these yourself. But you'll just kind of go through and you'll see City Hall, the acquisition date was September 2022. Colby, the acquisition date was April 2023. It's important for you to know, how many years has it taken to get that rental rate increase. And you'll see that over the next couple of slides in the portfolio, and it lists the asset name, the acquisition date, the rental rate at time of acquisition, the rental rate in December of 2025, and then what fund that particular asset is owned in. All right, let's turn our attention to the Secure Freedom Fund. We have so many updates to go. I would say we're like officially behind, despite the fact that we worked our hearts out.
We deleted like 40% of the slides from this presentation.
The whole last week is like, how do we keep it tight? How do we keep it tight? And here we are, 80 minutes in. Yeah. Unsurprising for those of you that know us. Secure Freedom Fund is officially our biggest fund ever. We have a little over $35 million of investor capital in that fund. We closed on 2 assets last quarter, Northern Hills Apartments and Villages at Essex Park, over $85 million in assets under management. And then, as Nick mentioned, we have an update for you at the end of our slides for an asset that we got under LOI just in the last 24 hours. If you're interested in either adding to your position in the Secure Freedom Fund or joining the Secure Freedom Fund, you can join the waitlist at securefreedomfund.com. A question had come in earlier of like, well, why is there a waitlist for the Secure Freedom Fund? And the reason is we don't just have it open all of the time because we need to be able to place that capital into an asset so that it can start generating that return so that we can service out the 10% rate of return to our investors. So we open it when we get something under contract, raise whatever amount we need for that acquisition, and then if there's a renovation, and then we close it. So we just closed on Villages at Essex Park, and then we closed the Secure Freedom Fund, and then when we have a need for additional capital for the next acquisitions in the Secure Freedom Fund, we'll open it again. It first opens to existing investors if you'd like to increase your position in the fund. The benefit of that is the minimum investment is $25,000, but once you're in the fund, you can add in increments of $1,000. You just need to email us because we have to manually set up that paperwork, and then it opens to the wait list, and then it opens to the general public. Northern Hills Apartments was a smaller...
Wait, we bought this?
We did.
Oh, man, I forgot all about this.
Yeah, we bought this. Northern Hills Apartments, smaller asset, just 32 units, all 2-bed, 1-bath, in-unit laundry, which is huge, central HVAC, which is huge. Those are kind of the things that renters will look for, and it's either like yes or no, right? If they're a renter who wants in-unit laundry, price doesn't matter. It's do you have in-unit laundry or not. So we always try to strive for in-unit laundry whenever we can. We purchased this for $3 million, $94,000 per unit. We had seller financing on this, so a note of $2.4 million at 5.75% for 3 years with interest-only payments, and then kind of a typical value-add plan that we're doing these days in terms of utility conservation, exterior renovations, light renovations to units. We're not targeting a major renovation, and really any asset right now that we're working with. Rolling out our bulk internet, improving marketing and leasing. And then this particular community did not allow pets in the past. And we, of course, are the most pet-friendly property management company in Rochester. So we allow pets. And again, that's one of those things that it's like a yes or no for residents.
Do you want to play your favorite clip?
No, I think in the interest of time, I'll save
fine.
it. So this is a funny little clip where Nick is installing a keypad lock. He used to do hundreds of these for our portfolio, and then as the company grew, now we have team members that cover that, and he's proud of his skills remain.
This is our most popular video clip of the entire year.
We'll put it in the replay email if you want to catch it. So working on onboarding that asset. Here's some pictures of it. You can see it's nice. What I would consider to be B-class housing, easy to live in. That in-unit washer dryer, central HVAC. Pets are now allowed here. Just a really nice, simple community. Mm-hmm. The big headline that you've been hearing us talk about all through 2025 is we closed on Villages at Essex Park, pulled out all the stops to close on December 30th, which meant, working with our attorneys every single day, working with HUD every single day. The government shut down for part of 2025, and HUD is...
Talk about uncertainty.
Yeah. HUD is controlled by the government. So that made it very uncertain if we would be able to close in 2025, but we know how important it is to get that depreciation out to our investors. So we pulled out all the stops to close on December 30th. 288 units, 26 buildings, 17 acres, approximately 1,000 residents. And this was one of those HUD loan assumptions, 2.18%, 37 years left on the...
It's like 33 years. I don't recall exactly. Yeah.
30 plus years left on that HUD loan. And this was a $16 million capital raise inside of the Secure Freedom Fund.
Yeah, so we've got some fun photos here and stuff that I recommend you check out. Check out the slide deck and just a ton of bullet points just to give you some perspective on the extraordinary outcomes that we've had, the incredible amount of activity in a short period of time. We do what we call a full court press. We had like 20 staff people there the day of closing. We had team members fly in. We had staffing there 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have to get everyone into our system. There's so many people to track down, and for their benefit to get them to sign estoppel agreements and make sure we're on the same page about when rent is due and how much rent is and how much their security deposit is. No small effort on a community this size. I was very pleased that in all those interactions, a month in, we've only had 3 units where we've had to ask people to vacate. Our goal is to just work with people as best we can, and we knew that this community needed some improvement on the management front, and so just overall, could not be more proud of our outcomes there. There was a blizzard the day of closing, and it was unclear who was supposed to clear snow, so we just sent our team in to clear snow. It's a big deal. There's thousands of delinquent items from city inspections that need to be fixed. We need to get the community's existing vendors that were already doing painting and flooring and stuff there. We need to get them on board in our system so we can pay them so that they can keep doing their valuable work. We've already completed half a dozen turns, and we've released some units, and we've got the site staff. We were able to we offered them employment with our organization so they'd not be left in the lurch, and they're getting kind of set up with our system, and things have been just incredibly successful. This is an interesting story. So literally the day before closing, which was it was Christmas Day, so not. I'm trying to think. We closed on the 30th.
The day before our final walkthrough.
Yeah, the day before our final walkthrough, that's what it was. There was a package theft. An individual broke into the package room and stole all the packages, literally trying to steal people's Christmas presents. So we call this person the Grinch, and
it's literally like out of Home Alone. Look at
they drive the same van. I called
It's
him the Wet Bandit originally, but then people didn't quite get it.
We're showing our age with Home Alone.
He drives the Wet Bandit van from Home Alone. And this person, we worked with law enforcement. This person has been apprehended, and that was a huge statement. We took over, and within days of us taking over management, we literally, the person who stole your Christmas present is now in jail. These are the kind of bold statements that we want to make to tenants, that there are people here who care about you, who take massive action when there's a problem, and that there are rules, and people are held accountable to the rules. So when we say there's a rule, you should do it. There's a 5-second clip here. You can just click on it. Yep. So, see if this comes through. And I think this sound will come through here. See, the person threw a bottle onto the ground. So when we bought the asset, day of closing, I get out of my car in front of the clubhouse, and there's a broken liquor bottle in front of the clubhouse. I'm like, that's weird, and we swept it up. Come back the next day, there's another broken liquor bottle. Swept up. Next day, there's someone's walking by and throwing a liquor bottle on the ground. We put up a security camera, and we can't figure out where it's coming from. Put up another security camera from another angle. Finally find it. There's a person who's just been stepping out of their balcony at 2 a.m, and after they have their liter of vodka for the day, throwing their liquor bottle on the ground. And we're like, well, we can't have that. So we went and knocked on their door. Hey, there's no judgment in our hearts for your lifestyle decisions here. You can, have a good time every evening, I suppose, but you can't throw a liquor bottle on the ground, or we're gonna have to ask you to leave. And they're like, oh, so sorry. Yep, we're not gonna do that again. And problem resolved. And you can understand that little vignette of it's just insane that this person was doing this thing. It's a strange lifestyle choice, and someone who comes to tour the community, as a prospect, they're not going to want to live in a community where there's a broken liquor bottle in front of the clubhouse. It's literally the first thing they see. He actually had to throw that liquor bottle over the future tenant parking space to get the bottle onto the ground. And then everyone else sees that behavior as well and says, oh, well, I guess we can do whatever we want. So we're just having hundreds of these types of little conversations. There's a person who there was a tire just sitting out on their front patio. And, I was walking the property, knocked on the door. Hey, you have a garage. Please put that tire in your garage. Looks like a great tire. You should not throw it away. I don't know why there's a tire on your front patio, but you can't have a tire, like a big car tire. Just those little things, hundreds of those interactions. It really cleans up the community. This is a huge community, 17 acres, 26 buildings. What can we do to make people feel that there's someone there who cares in short order? Most of the air handlers for the common areas did not work, so there's a lot of stale air, kind of odors and stuff. We got almost all the air handlers working. We installed smart thermostats so we can tell what temperature it is in these common areas. Very big deal when it's 20 below zero outside. We went into every laundry room, and there are 20 laundry rooms in this community. It is a big community. There are 20 laundry rooms. Just try to It's crazy. So we put up some decor. We cleaned them up. We fixed a few things here and there and put up some nice signage, and just so people, when they go to do their laundry, they see that, hey, there's someone here who cares. I'm going to be there all day here. 2 days from now, putting in a new common access system for all the entry doors. There's a lot of entry doors. We updated light bulbs. There's more bright lighting that's more energy efficient. We put in motion sensor switches so that there's no dark areas when you walk into like the laundry room, like the lights automatically come on. We've purchased hundreds of water-saving toilets. That's a pain point for the community right now, is the toilets are old, don't work very well, and waste a lot of water and just don't give you a great experience as a tenant using them. We're waiting on a permit right now, but we're chomping at the bit to go upgrade toilets throughout. So what can we do to make changes? We've upgraded the clubhouse. We put in new art. We've got this classy, Black Swan. We put in, new televisions and stuff. We put in snacks and a coffee station, and then just basic life safety stuff. So I can't make this up. About half of the fire alarm panels, because there's at least 15 fire suppression systems and probably 13 alarm systems, something like that. I can't remember. And like half of those alarm systems were out of compliance. They're red tagged. Literally, there's just a big bright red tag on the fire alarm panel. It's like, should probably fix that. And we got those fixed within a week. We had a vendor there and got all of the fire alarm systems up to snuff so that they're functioning correctly within a week of purchase. You might think there's a few keys to this property. We had thousands of keys that were in different locations, different organization schemes, and so they're all now clearly labeled. Just think about the amount of time to sort out all these keys, to label them, so that when a vendor comes in, when you do a tour, whatever, you can get a key and you can get into a unit. We launched our new website. I'm going through this real fast, but there's like 1,000 person hours that got poured into this place in 30 days. Is just a massive impact. Think about the visual when you have this massive website. Trash is a very viscerally displeasing thing. We literally had a member of our team at 7 a.m. every day go to every garbage corral and take a photo of the trash. Like, this is not sexy stuff, y'all, but this is the block and tackle work of making a community a beautiful place to live, literally and figuratively. When you go to throw your trash out and the trash is all piled up, so we shifted around, reconfigured some of the dumpsters. You can see a magnet there saying you can't put bulky waste in there. It's actually kind of clever. We're like, how do we put signage on a dumpster? We got the really high durability, UV resistant magnets that go on like a car wrap. And so we got like a dumpster wrap because there was so much bulky waste being disposed of. We put out construction dumpsters to be filled up. We added Saturday trash pickup. I mean, that's usually when you're at your house the most, is on the weekends. And there wasn't weekend pickup at this community. There wasn't weekend pickup. So when people are there the most, that's when they see smelly, piled high trash all weekend, and there is not overflowing trash at this community anymore. Took us a few weeks to solve this problem. It cost a little bit of money, took some work, but that's just a small portion, a small portion of the incredible things that we've achieved at this community in just 30 days.
Yeah. So much appreciation to our team.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, it's challenging for them to close on something on December 30th.
Yep.
We had a number of team members who are remote, who do a lot of, say, like data analysis or other things for us. And many of them flew into Rochester to just be all hands on deck here at Villages at Essex Park. And, I didn't think of this as we were preparing the slides, but kind of the first half of the slides are the things that are kind of largely out of our control, right? We can't control interest rates, but we can think about how we behave in relation to interest rates. We can't control taxes, but we can think about how we behave with the assessor, those sorts of things. But the things that we can control, like making sure that life safety improvements happen, making sure that we're up to date on our inspections, making sure that residents have a nice marketing experience, nice living experience, taking care of the nuts and bolts of where people live, right? What's the plumbing like? What's the trash like? All of those sort of things that you touch and experience throughout the day that impacts how someone feels, where they're living. Those are the things that we try to pour as much of our focus into, right? We have to be aware of the things that are outside of our focus. You can't ever, bury your head in the sand there. That would be reckless and irresponsible. But really spending probably 70% of our time on the things that we can control, 30% of the times that things that are a little more outside of our control, and just making improvements where we can, and seeing that reflected in rent growth and NOI, and then hoping that the macroeconomic situation, provides a little tailwind as well. We're on our last couple of slides, and then we have a couple of questions that we hadn't gotten to yet. So if you're here with us live, I anticipate we might go maybe 10 more minutes, or if you're listening here on the replay.
Hey, we've had massive attendance today. It's been a beautiful thing.
Yeah, wonderful.
So
all right, I'll share our screen here. Want to do a little drum roll?
I think. Or wait, no, I did this. All right. Ready?
Yay!
New acquisition.
Yay! Okay, so let me tell you guys what it's like to be married to Nick, or even for our team members, right? Who work for Black Swan. So all leading up to Villages at Essex Park, Nick's like, man, this one's like a beast to close. This HUD loan assumption, government shutdown, 288 units, 40 million. This is the biggest asset in our portfolio. We're going to fly everybody in. This is going to be a huge mountain to climb with the transition. Like, we're really going to take a break after this, just focus on operations, get things settled. And we're all like, yeah, like, Nick, you kind of say things like that, but they don't usually happen. But I don't know, like, maybe he's right this time. Like, Villages at Essex Park is the largest acquisition we've ever had, 288 units closing on December 30th. Like, maybe it's actually going to happen this time. And then like 2.5 weeks into it, he's like, oh, things are going great at Essex.
Things are going great. Things are going like 10 times better than we planned for.
Things are going great. I would agree that objectively things are going great.
We wouldn't have things under contract if things were not going so amazing.
I agree. But it's just the eye roll at Nick when he's like, oh, this year we're slowing down. Like, we're just like, yes, sir, of course, right. And then, 10 days later, he's like, so what would you guys think? And we're like, oh, if you want to buy something else, here we are. It's exciting.
It is nice to talk to brokers from a place of power. It's like, we're closing on this thing. Wouldn't buy it unless it's an insanely good price or something like that. And, this asset, the original asking price was $12 million, and we're under contract here. I need to draft the contract. We have an accepted LOI at $8.45 million with an incredibly favorable loan assumption, 3.5% loan assumption from a bank that we know, and it's going to be an incredible deal. This one will be operationally intensive because it's currently student housing, and it's not very successful as a student housing property. And we think it will be much more successful as a market. We still offer it to students, but it will not be explicitly a student housing property the way it is today. It's a tough asset class that is not thriving in the current kind of set of economic conditions. So we're going to hopefully close on this here in like the next 45 days or something like that. We'll see. With the loan assumption, we're able to close way faster than originating the new loan. I need to get off this webinar and draft the contract. And we'll close. Unbelievably excited
a loan
about that
assumption
project.
From a local regional bank, not from HUD or Fannie or Freddie, where those loan assumptions tend to take months and months.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's pretty exciting. We got the news that we got the accepted LOI yesterday.
Yeah, all 4-bed, 2-bath units. They're 1,240 square feet per unit, and we're under contract at $134,000 a unit. I mean, replacement cost in this thing would be like $250 a unit or something like that. Our basis, our cost per unit, cost per square foot is insanely low. It's actually in really good shape. They've taken good care of it. Physically, it's not like terribly distressed. It's just it's very difficult to operate student housing in the current economic environment. Not a lot of people are going to school in person and living on campus the way they used to. So you'll see a lot of these in the future, I think, in every market that has a university.
Mm-hmm. It's also next to a community college, and I do find that folks at community college tend to live with their parents or just kind of in the broader community. So I don't think we've been watching this asset for probably about 5 years now. Actually, Nick and I went through all the times that we had considered acquiring this asset last night over dinner, and we're like, oh, we finally got it. Like, the numbers finally made sense. Because Nick negotiated it down from $12 million to under $9 million.
Not a simple or easy negotiation.
But I think the fact that it's adjacent to a community college is part of the reason that it's just never quite thrived as student housing. And then another new acquisition.
Yeah, another new acquisition. This is a great just bread and butter asset. We're going to drop into Secure Freedom Fund. We can acquire it just with cash that we have on hand. We've needed less cash than we expected for Essex Park so far, and it seems like that's going to be sustained. So this is also in Rochester, just a 16-unit community, but a beautiful community. It's 4 buildings and then 4 garage buildings as well. Very low density, beautiful green space. Feels almost more like townhomes. We're purchasing it for 125,000 units, $2 million, and this is going to drop right in the portfolio. It's actually just down the street from Northern Hills, and so we're anticipating this will be a very kind of quick, easy, smooth acquisition. And I mean, this is the powerful, having a private equity fund is such a hopelessly unfair advantage because you get this economy of scale. I mean, we're essentially able to just add an additional property to the fund for free and give additional cash flow to the fund to deliver returns to those investors, additional collateral that protects their investment in Secure Freedom Fund, and there's no additional capital raise needed for it because we already have that vehicle up and running. Like the legal overhead of doing taxes and stuff is almost nothing. The management overhead, it's unbelievably powerful to have a structure like that where you can pick up these types of assets. Normally, there's no way you could buy an asset this small in a private equity fund, and we can easily do it. It's incredibly efficient.
The joke is our very first asset in the Secure Freedom Fund was originally named Mandolin Place. And I didn't have any particular emotional attachment to that or whatever. And so when we thought about what we would rename it during the rebrand, I said, I really like the word Northern, right? Minnesota. It's a classy word, Northern. I don't know. I have an affinity toward it. I really like it. So we named that Northern Place. We kept the place so that there was some continuity there in the community and the reputation and that sort of thing, but changed it from Mandolin Place to Northern Place. And since then, in the Secure Freedom Fund, we now have Northern Hills and Northern Valley. And I'm like, I think I made the wrong choice.
Should be Southwestern Place or something like that. I don't know.
Our poor accountants
We'll bring back
trying
Mandolin
to
Place.
keep all this stuff straight. All right, so that is everything for our update here. Here's the update in summary. Closed on Villages at Essex Park. We're excited to share those updates over the coming quarters of how we're stewarding that asset in 2026. Tax season prep, we're targeting April 1st for our K1 delivery. Please do take a look at blackswan.investnext.com. Even if you think your information is correct, you never quite know. Maybe you forgot to put your address in or forgot to put your updated email or, who knows. Just please take a few minutes to take a look at that, blackswan.investnext.com. We did our distribution update, our ICE update, portfolio-wide update, rent growth update, closed on Northern Hills, and then shared 2 new acquisitions that will go into the Secure Freedom Fund. That is everything for our presentation. We'll get the replay out as quickly as we can. Usually takes about 48 hours or so. We'll get that brochure up here in the next couple of days as well. All of that gets uploaded to blackswanteam.com/updates. If you're an investor, it also goes out to you in the InvestNext portal. If you're on our mailing list, it goes out to you in our general mailing list. And then we also publicly upload it to YouTube. So if at any point you're like, wonder what the update is, just go to YouTube, search for Black Swan Real Estate. Better yet, subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and you'll find them all there.
Please like and subscribe.
Yeah, YouTube. There we go. Couple of questions that we still have to answer here. Does Hall still create our K1s? Yep, we're still working with Hall. We've been with them for many, many years. So they'll do our K1s for the 2025 tax year as well. And then let me just kind of scroll up a little bit so I can get to our other questions here that we hadn't answered yet. A question came in about the Secure Freedom Fund. So this question came in a while ago. Sorry, we weren't able to answer it throughout the course of the presentation. I'm in the Secure Freedom Fund and wondering what you anticipate for the K1 percentage. So I assume you mean depreciation for 2026. I asked because I'm considering investing a larger amount in the Freedom Fund soon. That number is really hard to pin down because think about it. Bonus depreciation comes from new acquisitions, right? That's when you get that big pop. You do the cost segregation study, and in that first year of ownership, you take bonus and accelerated depreciation. And it's only January. And literally, if you had asked us on January 1st, when will our next acquisition be? Nick probably would have said February or March. I probably would have said May because I sort of believed him that we would slow down on acquisitions a little bit. So it really depends on acquisitions, right? What we're able to get under contract, what makes good financial sense. So as the year goes on, we have more and more and more clarity. But now at the beginning of the year where we literally don't know what our acquisitions will be for 2026, it's almost impossible to predict. I'll say that we do everything we can in terms of cost seg studies, bonus accelerated depreciation, making sure that all the expenses pass through, just everything we can to tax optimize all of our funds, really trying to push as many of the gains in the Secure Freedom Fund into long-term capital gains, which has the most favorable tax rate, but not able to give kind of an estimate this early in the year for Secure Freedom Fund for depreciation.
Yep.
A question came up with the massive Mayo expansion. Is there an expectation that taxes will continue to increase in the Rochester area? I don't think that the Mayo expansion really has a big, impact on it. If anything, that helps in the sense that Mayo is bringing in other healthcare adjacent businesses, jobs. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4 Discovery Square are large like healthcare commercial buildings where there's labs and biotech companies and IT companies that collaborate with Mayo, and those are all part of the tax base. It's really just a story of tax increases, across the entire country because of the collapse of office through the pandemic. So my estimation is that the Mayo expansion is sort of neutral to taxes, and that it's really just a story of what's happening in the country.
Rochester and Minnesota are in a far better situation than, say, like Los Angeles or Chicago, but it's just it's the story across the country.
Jenny had a question. Does that factor at all in the SALT deduction for investors, or does the tax liability stay at the fund level? Because I didn't see that question when it came in, I'm not sure what that factor is. So email me what that specific question is, and I'll make sure that gets answered for you. Sorry, I wasn't able to catch that, right at the time that you asked it, so that I had a little more context for that question. Shannon asked a question. In the last update, you were waiting for mortgage rates to drop in order to pursue cash out refinance on some of the properties. Did rates not drop enough for this to happen? Rates did go down 3 steps in 2025. In one of the slides, we share the 3 Fed meetings where there was a quarter rate deduction at each of those Fed meetings. And then the most recent Fed meeting in January, they held rates steady. So rates did come down a little bit, but certainly not proportional to how much they went up in 2022. And then really the question becomes, let's say we could do a cash out refi and get, say $1 million or something. But right now we have several years left on, say, for example, 3% fixed rate debt. Is it worth it to trade, say, 3% fixed rate debt that we might have several years left on it to get, say, 6% fixed rate debt in order to unlock a little bit of liquidity? Probably not, right? Because that liquidity is just going to balance out over the coming months with that much higher debt service from that new mortgage that has, double the interest rate. So rates still need to come down a little bit. We'll see how rates, unfold over the coming year, but really thinking about kind of squeezing all of the benefit out of the fixed rate debt that we were able to lock in 2020, 2021, and early 2022. A lot of that debt across the portfolio is at 2 3/4, 3, 3 1/4, 3 1/2, and squeezing every single day of that, ultra low interest rate debt before we refinance, so that we get as much benefit from that lower debt service.
And it isn't just rate; it's overall lender sentiment and kind of how it interfaces with treasuries and stuff. So this is going to sound kind of crazy, but oftentimes when the Fed lowers their their interbank lending rate, the treasury rate, the forward-looking interest rates will actually go up, because the market says, well, if rates are going down now, that means they'll probably rebound at some point in the future. And the rate that we're able to get on debt for an apartment building, it's kind of a mix of Fed rate, of treasury rate, of the overall kind of interest rate or lending appetite in the market, and the level of conservatism in the lending community right now, it's staggering. So like I just had we're always looking at refis. We're always running the numbers and stuff. That's one reason why I went and dug so deeply into the books, so we could send all this to lenders and say, hey, if we did do a refi today, what would that look like? And so one came back, which previously I think we were underwriting, we could get like a $2 million cash out refi on it. And the underwriting came back, and they had underwritten an assumption that taxes increased significantly, because they saw how much value we've added to the property, and they said, well, the assessor is going to catch on and they're going to jack up your taxes. So in the past, it was normal for a lender to assume that if you transact at like a higher value than the assessed value, that the assessor will increase the value to the purchase price of the property. So let's say the assessor says it's worth $8 million and you buy it for $10 million. The lender will assume that your taxes go up 20%, that the assessor increased it to $10 million. This is the first time I've ever seen an assessor say, well, you're not selling it, but you're refinancing it. We can see the value we've created. So we're just going to assume as part of a refi that your taxes are going to go up 20%. Like, what? Like, what? There's no reason. We're not going to like, hey, assessor, come on in and, we'll take a look around, get some photos, look at all the amazing things we've done. Would you like to increase our taxes, please? We're not going to do that. That's but the lenders, they see the tax conundrum that municipalities are up against. And now the lenders, and that took our $2 million cash out refi down to a $1 million cash out refi. Well, at $2 million, maybe it made sense to do an immediate cash out refi. At $1 million, we're in a pretty good spot. We'll just keep going. We're not going to change anything right now. So it's not just it's not just interest rates. It's just how incredibly careful lenders are being right now.
Yeah, good question there. How do you envision investors in Fund 1 and 2 eventually benefiting from the legacy properties appreciation over the next 10 to 20 years? That is an excellent question. That's really important to understand. Fund 1, 2, 3, and 4. We call those the legacy funds, and then the Secure Freedom Fund is kind of separate from the legacy funds. You can think of funds 1 through 4 as very similar to you owning real estate, say in your own neighborhood. You buy a single family home in your own town, you fix it up, you harvest your equity as quickly as possible, and then you continue to own that asset for decades to come, and you benefit from cash flow, debt pay down. Over time, maybe you harvest some more equity through cash out refis, and then eventually you sell that asset and you harvest all of the equity at the time of sale. That's exactly how funds 1, 2, 3, and 4 are structured. In the initial period, it's a full return of capital. 100% of all profits go to our investors until they're completely repaid. At Black Swan, we don't take any profits during that time so that we can prioritize our investors and de-risk you from the deal as quickly as possible. Very similar to if you bought a single family home in your own neighborhood, you might be thinking about how can I renovate this and do a cash out refi to harvest back what was my original down payment as quickly as possible. And then after that, we're in that infinite rate of return period, the 50-50 split. And again, all sources of profit, whether it's cash flow, a future cash out refi, and then ultimately the sale, those profits flow through to investors. And so that's why we call them the legacy funds, because it's a long-term wealth, long generational wealth, decades long, right? All of the headwinds, all of the up and downs that might happen in any given quarter or any given year. When you look at real estate over a decades-long perspective, it's an extraordinarily good investment that almost always appreciates, right? Of course, there's always some wild exceptions, but if you think about an investor sent me an email earlier this week that said, I don't exactly remember all the details because I read it quickly, but it was like, my mother-in-law just moved in with us. She's owned her home for 35 years, and we're going to keep it as a rental. I don't know. I don't need to know anything about where that home, is or what it was purchased for to know that if someone has owned a piece of property for 35 years, they are sitting on a lot of equity. And I can make an assumption that maybe they've paid down a lot of the debt over that time, depending on how many times they've done a cash out refi. And investors participate in all of that in funds 1 through 4. So you can kind of think of it as that early period where your capital's in the deal that secures your position in the fund through the entirety of the fund, including the sale and all of the equity that's harvested there. Again, very similar to if you acquired real estate, just direct ownership in your own neighborhood. And then just to, kind of put a bow on that, Secure Freedom Fund in a lot of ways is quite different. So it's a fixed rate of return, kind of more similar to say like a CD or a bond, but at a much higher rate, a much more favorable tax basis. So you get the tax benefits and the diversification that comes from real estate, but much more predictability. It's a fixed rate of return as opposed to a variable rate of return. And then you're getting that steady monthly cash flow if you want to choose that option, or the benefit from compounding. And then that benefit is that your rate goes above the 10% rate of return because you're getting that return on return. So that's how funds 1 through 4 work and how the Secure Freedom Fund works. And that's a great question because that is where the value lies in funds 1 through 4 is the long-term asset hold. And despite the fact that once you have all of your original capital back, you still retain all of your ownership in that fund, in perpetuity until we eventually disposition those assets 20 or 25 years down the line.
Great question here. Around when should we realistically expect return of capital for Fund 2? That's a very on point question. And the answer is it depends. We can't tell you exactly when that's going to be. And when we're raising capital for the legacy funds, we tell people we don't know exactly when that's going to be. We target this time frame, but it's always difficult to say. We can tell you that all of our investors in Fund 1, 2, 3, 4, they're all in very good shape, and I think doing better than 95% of investors who got into deals at those different time frames. And the 1% distribution we're doing this year, I guess I'm going to be surprised if we do a similar distribution amount next year. I think we're being so conservative, so hopelessly conservative, that will almost certainly be able to significantly increase that in the future. And then let's say there's like a dip in rates, or let's say we just get into a situation where we have a little bit more certainty about the future. Well, that's going to change a lot of our calculus for future distributions. And again, we've always said the return of capital. I say the return of capital and the legacy fund structure is lumpy. It's the opposite of Secure Freedom Fund. So I hope that answers your question. I wish I could say, it's going to be 3.7 years until there's a return of capital, but that's not how that works. That is how Secure Freedom Fund works, but that's not how the legacy funds work.
Yeah. Sometimes people in funds 1 through 4 will make an assumption that it's linear, like, oh my gosh, if we're getting a 1% distribution in 2026, is it going to be 100 years before I have a return of capital? And those funds were never meant to be linear, right? They were always meant to distribute out excess cash flow during the early years, and then there would be a big burst of return of capital from the cash out refi. That's across every asset we've ever done where we've done a cash out refi. That's how they all behave. So it's not linear. It was never intended to be linear. Think small amounts of cash flow in the beginning, big pop from the cash out refi, and then in that infinite rate of return period where you continue to have your shares in the fund in perpetuity and benefit from the cash flow, the debt pay down, and the eventual sale of those assets in the future. Will there ever be any new legacy funds? Probably, right? We love that model. That's the model on which we built our own family's personal wealth. There has to be a lot more stability in interest rates. It doesn't mean that interest rates can't go up and down. When we were building our own personal portfolio, we were building at a time that interest rates were steadily increasing, but it was like a quarter point, a half point. It wasn't, this huge escalation that happened in 2022. So I think there will be a Fund 5. Secure Freedom Fund is a very large fund, and so we'll be working on that for the next couple of years. But will there ever be a new legacy fund? I think we're going to be around for probably 20 or 30 more years, and so very likely there will be another legacy fund in that time frame.
One easy way to think about this is the legacy fund model is predicated on we buy an asset and we think at this point in the future we can do a cash out refinance. And for like 40 years, that was a relatively kind of predictable thing in commercial real estate. Even through 08, 08 was not nearly as disruptive as what we've seen here recently. And today, if we buy an asset today, there's no way we could tell you when we would be able to get a cash out refi on that asset. So how are we buying assets? Well, we know we're buying them at a very low price, so we're happy about that. Interest rate might be high. We're still getting a fixed rate, even though it's a high interest rate. We're still getting a fixed rate, so we're protected from downside. And some of this debt we're locking in for 30 plus years because we know we can hit that 10% cash on cash rate of return, even though we have no clue when we might be able. That used to be our entire underwriting is okay, what's the sequence of events that gets us to a cash out refi? And that's not a thing that anyone can underwrite to right now. At some point in the future, the uncertainty that we're experiencing right now will go away. Society cannot live in this level of uncertainty and sustain. It's just not. It's not feasible for the indefinite future. So whenever that comes back around, we would love to do another legacy fund. But for now, we are buying assets where we don't need to sell, we don't need to refi. We just do a 10% cash on cash rate of return. And investors love it. They love the certainty that comes with it, and it's working great. For Black Swan, we had our best acquisitions year ever. So we are making really delicious lemonade out of these lemons, and I was trying to get the arc into the bucket of lemonade or something like that to mix those metaphors.
And not drowning in the lemonade?
And not drowning in the lemonade, yes.
Did I help you?
Yeah, I think we landed it.
Very good. Okay, so Jenny clarified her question about the SALT deduction, referencing the large tax expense in Fund 2. Will the pro rata share of SALT tax be reported on investor K-1s? I'll check with our CPAs, but I'm 99% certain that that's not the case, that expenses and income flow through to the K-1, but it's not as though an expense from, say, repairing a hand railing is any different on the K-1, that expenses that come from, say, taxes or insurance, it's all kind of lumped together, except with the exception of depreciation, which is a different type of expense because that's a paper expense, not an actual expense. So that's the answer to that question. I think that covers everything. We got it in 2 hours, which I think is probably I feel so
I'm going to celebrate that.
We worked so hard for fewer slides talking about how to shorten the presentation. And then I think we ended up with our longest quarterly update in probably a couple of years. But hopefully you enjoyed it. For those of you that stuck with us live the whole time or catching it on the replay, we will see you next quarter. Take care, everyone.
Bye.